If you're a new leader, this is one of the moments that's going to test you faster than anything else. Not the big speech, not the promotion, not the title. It's the moment you have to sit down with somebody and talk about something they probably don't want to hear. Maybe they're underperforming. Maybe their attitude is hurting the team. Maybe they keep showing up late. Maybe they're making everyone else's job harder. And now it's your responsibility to deal with it. And this is where a lot of leaders get stuck. They wait. They hint around the issue. They hope that it fixes itself. Or they go into the conversation emotional and make the whole thing worse. Here's the truth. If you can't have difficult conversations, you won't lead effectively for very long. Because leadership isn't just about encouraging people when everything's going right. It's about stepping into uncomfortable moments and handling them the right way. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. We're going to talk about why new leaders struggle with difficult conversations, the biggest mistakes that make them harder than they need to be, and a simple framework that you can use to walk into a conversation knowing what to say and how to stay on track. Because one hard conversation handled well can build trust, but one avoided way too long can crush your credibility as a leader. Let's start here. Why this feels so hard. Difficult conversations are hard for new leaders for a few simple reasons. First off, a lot of new leaders still want to be liked. That's normal. Most people step into a leadership position, want the team to see them as approachable, supportive, and someone that the team can trust. That part is good. The problem starts when being liked is more important than being honest. Second is that most people, they hate tension. They don't want the awkwardness. They don't want that pushback. They don't want the other person to get defensive. So instead of addressing the issue, they delay it. Third, and this is a big one, they genuinely don't know how to approach it or what to say. They know that the issue needs to be addressed. They just don't know how to bring it up without being too harsh, too emotional, or completely unprepared. So what do? They start dropping little hints. They get passive aggressive. They complain about the person to somebody else. Or they don't say anything until frustration blows up and they lose emotional control. And that's where things go bad. Because avoiding the conversation doesn't help the relationship. It quietly damages it. It creates confusion, it creates resentment, it creates inconsistency, and eventually it creates a bigger problem than the one you had to begin with. That's the trap. A lot of new leaders think that they're keeping the peace. What they're really doing is delaying leadership. Next, let's talk about the mindset shift that makes everything easier. A difficult conversation isn't an attack. It's not about putting someone in their place. It's not about proving you're in charge. And it's definitely not about winning. A difficult conversation is about clarity. That's it. You're bringing clarity into a situation that's become unhealthy, unclear, or unsustainable. You're helping someone understand what's happening, why it matters, and what needs to change. That's leadership. And this is important because the way you see a conversation will change and shape the way you have the conversation. If you see it as a confrontation, you're probably going to avoid it. If you see it as a power move, you're probably going to come in too aggressive. But if you see it as clarity, you're going to come in with purpose. And when you handle it that way, these conversations can actually build trust. Because strong people, they don't need fake comfort. They need honesty. They need standards. They need a leader who's willing to tell them what's going on in a real way. A way that's calm, fair, and respectful. So stop thinking about difficult conversations as personal conflict. Start thinking of them as leadership responsibility, because that's what they are. Next, let's talk about the biggest mistake that new leaders make. They wait way too long. And this is where everything starts to fall apart. They see the issue early, but they tell themselves that it's probably not a big deal. Maybe it's just one bad day. Maybe it'll fix itself. Maybe now isn't the right time. Maybe they need more proof, so they wait. Then it happens again. Now they're more irritated. The team has started to notice. The person keeps doing it. And what could have been a simple 5-minute conversation becomes a bigger problem with more emotion attached to it. That's why timing matters so much in these conversations. Don't wait until you're angry. Don't wait until your frustration is driving the conversation. Don't wait until you replayed the situation 100 times in your head and you've built that case up like it's actually going to trial. Address it early, not publicly, not harshly, not emotionally. Early. When feedback and correction becomes part of your leadership, your team starts to expect it, and when you give it, it's way easier and way better received. Because early conversations feel like coaching, late conversations feel like punishment. Because if your goal is correction, growth, and trust, coaching works a whole lot better than surprise punishment. So if you remember one thing from this video, remember this. The longer you wait, the harder the conversation becomes. Next up, I want to give you an actual tried and tested framework. I've used it for years, and trust me, it works. When you need to have that difficult conversation, think about it in 4 parts. State the issue, explain the impact, set the expectation, and confirm the next step. That's the structure. If you go into that conversation with those 4 things, you're already light years ahead of most new leaders. So let's dive a little deeper. Step 1 was state the issue. Start clearly. Don't circle around the issue. Don't hide the issue under small talk. Don't take 5 minutes to warm up the conversation before you dive in. Be respectful, but be direct. You might say something like this: I want to talk to you about the 3 times that you've been late this week. Or I need to talk to you about the way you handled that meeting. Or I've noticed that your follow-through has been inconsistent and we need to address that. Notice what all of those have in common. They're simple, they're clear, and they don't sound dramatic. That matters, because when you ramble, soften too much, or over-explain before you get to the point, people feel the tension, but they also start to get confused. Step 2 was explain the impact. This is where you connect the behavior to the bigger problem. This is where leadership comes in. You're not just simply pointing at something that you personally don't like, you're explaining why it matters. When you show up late, the whole team has to adjust, and that affects trust. Or when you speak to people in that way, they lose trust in you as a leader and they stop coming to you as much as they should. Or when you don't follow through on a task to completion, somebody else has to pick up your slack. Now, the conversation is grounded in impact and not emotion, and that helps keep the conversation professional. Number 3 was set the expectation. This is where a lot of new leaders, they get weak. They explain the problem really well, but they never clearly articulate what needs to happen next. You have to say it clearly. I need you to be on time moving forward. I expect you to communicate professionally, even if you disagree. I need you to meet deadlines without repeated reminders. That's leadership. Clear standard, clear expectation, no guessing. Because if expectations are fuzzy, then accountability will be fuzzy too. Lastly is number 4. Confirm the next step. This is where you're going to close the conversation with clarity. Ask for understanding, ask for commitment. Make sure the person understands what happens next. That can sound something like this. Can you commit to correcting this? Is there anything getting in the way from you meeting this expectation? Going forward, this is the standard that I need from you. This is important because it turns a conversation into a real exchange and not just a speech. And sometimes this is where you'll uncover something useful. Maybe there's confusion. Maybe there's a resource issue. Maybe there's a misunderstanding that you didn't know. But none of that comes out if you do all of the talking. Next, I want to talk about tone, because tone matters more than most people think. Tone can save a conversation or destroy a conversation. You want to be calm, direct, and respectful. Not cold, not overly soft, not sarcastic, not angry. A lot of new leaders think that they need to sound tougher than they really need to be. They think authority comes from intensity. It doesn't. Authority comes from control. When you're calm, people listen. When you're direct, people understand. When you stay respectful, even during a hard conversation, people see maturity. That's real leadership presence. So before you walk into a difficult conversation, check yourself. Are you irritated? Are you trying to prove a point? Are you carrying emotion from 3 other things that happened during the day? If you are, pause. Because if emotion is driving the conversation, the message will get buried under your tone. And once that happens, the person usually stops listening to what you're saying and reacting to how you said it. That's when the conversation can go sideways. The goal is not to overpower the person. The goal is to improve the situation. Next, here's what I want you to avoid so this goes well. Let's make this practical. Here's the mistakes that will wreck a difficult conversation fast. First, don't do this in public. The old saying is praise in public, correct in private. Correct in private whenever possible. Public embarrassment creates defensiveness, not growth. Second, don't talk too much. This is a big one for us nervous leaders out there. They start talking, then they keep talking. Then they re-explain, then they soften it. Then they apologize for the whole thing. And all they're doing is creating confusion. Get in, get out. Be a human, but make sure you're being clear. Third, don't attack the person. Address the behavior, not their identity. Not you're lazy, not you're disrespectful. Talk about what happened, why it matters, and what needs to change. Don't leave the conversation without a standard. If nobody knows what right looks like when you end the conversation, then the conversation wasn't over. And last, don't skip the follow-up, because the follow-up is what proves that you meant what you said. People learn that your standards are optional, and that will hurt you fast as a new leader. Next, let's talk about a leadership truth that nobody talks about. Here's the truth that new leaders learn the hard way. Every difficult conversation that you avoid gets pushed onto your team. You may think that you're avoiding drama, but your people are still paying the price for it. They pay for it in extra work. They pay for it in frustration. They pay for it in lower standards. And over time, they pay for it in lost trust. Because when one person operates below the standard and leadership doesn't address it, your best people will notice. They always notice. And eventually they stop asking, why is that person getting away with it? And start asking, why isn't leadership addressing the problem? And that's when your credibility as the leader starts to take hits. Not because you were too hard, because you were too absent. That's why this matters so much. Difficult conversations are not just about addressing that person's behavior. They're about protecting the standards of the team and protecting the team. Because culture is less changed by what leaders say and more about the culture that they tolerate. That's the real issue. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, I get it, but I'd still be nervous. Good. That doesn't mean you're weak. That means you care. Most leaders are uncomfortable with difficult conversations at first. Even after 20 years, I can still be nervous going into a difficult conversation. That part is normal. The goal here isn't to become someone who loves confrontation. The goal is to become a person who can step into difficult conversations with clarity, confidence, and professionalism. And that takes reps. Your first few may feel awkward. You may stumble over some sentences. You might walk away wishing that you had said a certain part a different way. That's fine. Do it anyway. Because every time you handle one of these conversations the right way, you're building trust in yourself. You start proving to yourself that you can lead even during the uncomfortable times, not just the easy ones. And that matters because anybody can lead when everybody's happy. Real leadership shows up when something uncomfortable needs to be said and you say it in the right way. So here's the bottom line. Don't avoid that hard conversation. Don't wait until frustration takes over. Don't confuse silence with kindness. Address the issue early, explain the impact, set the expectation, and follow up. That's how you lead with both strength and respect. And honestly, one difficult conversation handled can save you weeks or months of tension, confusion, or team frustration. If you want to grow as a leader, this is one of the skills that you have to develop with purpose. Because leadership isn't proven when things are easy. Leadership is proven when a difficult conversation has to happen and you deliver it with clarity, calm, and professionalism. If this helped you, subscribe to my channel. I build real videos based off real world experience to help you lead better, faster. And drop a comment below. What's the hardest part of a difficult conversation for you? Is it starting it, knowing what to say, or controlling your emotions? I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.